Month of February, Black History Month, I'll share stories highlighting issues and people making a difference. Tonight, I'm focusing on this year's theme, African Americans and the vote. 2020 marks the 150th anniversary of the 15th Amendment, which gave the right of Black men to vote following the Civil War. To understand the present, we must first visit the past. The year was 1964. These three men were killed by members of the KKK in Mississippi. They were campaigning for all Black Americans to get the right to vote. 1 year later, in August of 1965, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act, which eliminated the restriction on the voting rights for Black people. But 55 years later, Keith Mays says the fight isn't over.
The African American vote is under attack.
Mays is a professor of African American and African Studies at the University of Minnesota. He says the National Black History theme for 2020 speaks to the ongoing struggle for the right to vote.
Collectively, Black people don't really get the right to vote until 1965 with the Voting Rights Act. We have to understand what's taking place, which is to say that there are people who stay up every night looking to take that right away from us. An example of that are the voter suppression laws that you see in every single state in the union. And I think that if one would put the voter registration laws, or voter suppression laws into context, you can actually compare them to some of the Jim Crow laws that were passed back in the late 19th century, early 20th century. Mainly the poll tax, the grandfather clause, and the literacy test.
As America prepares for the 2020 presidential election, Mays says there are already tactics underway to suppress the Black vote.
So we got the voter suppression laws, right? The new ones, voter ID. We're going to get rid of early registration. We're going to get rid of absentee. We're going to get rid of we're going to curtail voter registration drives. You see the same thing today with a voter ID law. Nothing that on the face of it that says anything about race, but they know that African Americans, particularly African Americans who are poorer, who may not have a lot of means, who make a certain amount of money every year, they know for a fact that they are more likely than not to carry a government-issued ID. And so that's how they get us. Many of us may not be registered, so we show up on election day and register that same day. But they're taking away our right to register on election day. The suppression is already underway. The question becomes, can the turnout mitigate against the suppression?
And when he talks about turnout, he's talking about the Black voter turnout. And when he talked about suppression, here's an example he pointed to. In Texas, state lawmakers want criminal penalties for people who improperly fill out voter registration forms. If you look in Arizona, some Republicans there propose new voting rules complicating submitting an early ballot. And in Tennessee, GOP lawmakers are considering a bill that would fine groups involved in voter registration drives, which is something we've seen African Americans doing for decades.
And all these reasons why voting is the focus of Black History Month?
Exactly, for this year.
Huge issue. One thing that Professor Mays always said to me that when we talked about that, I thought it's just so silly. You know, when people talk about the Black vote, you can't assume something's monolithic. That's ridiculous. We don't call it the white vote.
I think what they're saying when people say the Black vote, it's saying that as a Black person, your voice counts, your voice matters, and we are not a monolithic group.
Testosterone is what makes a man a man. But if you're eating foods that raise your estrogen, you're never going to have high.
The untold stories of the Southwest Florida African American community is being made possible in part by the Lee County Board of County Commissioners, the Charlotte County Government and County Commission, Bill Smith Appliances, and the Lee County Black History Museum.
How great is it that we get to tell everybody how Liberty Mutual customizes your car insurance so you only pay for what you need?
How to stop buffering issues anywhere, anytime, instantly.
Throughout the Mays is a professor of African American and African Studies at the University of Minnesota. He says the National Black History theme for 2020 speaks to the ongoing struggle for the right to vote.
Collectively, black people don't really get the right to vote until 1965 with the Voting Rights Act. We have to understand what's taking place, which is to say that there are people who stay up every night looking to take that right away from us. An example of that are the voter suppression laws that you see in every single state in the union. And I think that if one would put the voter registration laws, or voter suppression laws into context, you can actually compare them to some of the Jim Crow laws that were passed back in the late 19th century, early 20th century. Mainly the poll tax, the grandfather clause, and the literacy test.
As America prepares for the 2020 presidential election, Mays says there are already tactics underway to suppress the black vote.
So we got the voter suppression laws, right? The new ones. Voter ID. We're going to get rid of early registration. We're going to get rid of absentee. We're going to get rid of voter. We're going to curtail voter registration drives.
All right, hey everybody, how you doing today? Hope y'all, enjoyed that little interlude. Some ads kind of popped in there about testosterone and so forth like that. But that was just actually a video from, even though you only heard the audio, from February of last year. Basically to let people understand, like, there's still a lot of voter suppression that's going on. As much as we say it may be only in the southern states and the Midwest states, it does happen, in Democratic states as well too, which is why we need a lot of, forward moving legislation to make things happen, to make voting easier, to make registering to vote easier, to make sure that, there's voter education, and not just to a select group, but to a mass majority of the people. Trust me, if it was up to me, the same way we get all these mailers every 2 to 4 years, I'll be sending mailers to every single person, whether they're registered to vote or not. But we also have something coming up, and I believe it's 20. What is it? Matter of fact, Julie, real quick, thumbs up or not? AVR 2023, right? Okay, cool. So, and for those of you who don't know what AVR is just yet, we do have a special guest speaker. Assemblywoman Latrice Walker, she'll be coming on about 7:30-ish, to talk about that. I know there's many of you right now on Zoom, many of you right now on Facebook. This is Civic Engagement Ranked Choice Voting Info Session. Our presenter, which is presented by Brooklyn Voters Alliance, and our presenter today is Julie Kerr from Brooklyn Voters Alliance. I'm just here to host. I'm Anthony Beckford, and like I said, we have Latrice, Assemblywoman Latrice Walker from the 55th Assembly District, who will be coming on later on to talk about, her new appointment in the Assembly, but then also when it comes to AVR, which I'm gonna let her tell you what AVR is. Like it's almost like unwrapping a Christmas gift. So that way, most of you who do not understand what's going on, you'll actually get to have that pure joy instead of me ruining it for you. All right, so we're just gonna jump right into it. Go to real quick. Let me unmute you, Julie, and I'm just gonna let Julie, introduce herself and go on with the presentation for y'all as I try to get more people from the waiting room to hear.
Great. Thank you, Anthony, very much. Thank you for having me. Gilda is on the Zoom as well, and she's a fellow Brooklyn Voters Alliance member. So she wanted to check out the presentation, and hopefully we'll be giving some of these herself down in the weeks and months to come. This is the second presentation that Anthony has had us do. We did one 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we're really ramping these up, and we really commend Anthony. And it's incumbent of all the candidates running for city council in all the districts and all of the citywide races to take part in making sure that we, the voters, are educated in how ranked choice voting is going to work. So I'm going to try and show, the Board of Elections actually has a really good short 1.5-minute video. I'm going to try and show that just to give everybody the first look at what ranked choice voting is. Hopefully it will work. I tried this at a previous presentation and it did not, but I was given a tip earlier today about how it will work. So we shall see if it in fact does. So if you can't hear any sound, let me know. So I'm going to start sharing my screen someplace. Okay, and hold on for a second. So I'm going to stop that for a second and go over here. One of these days I will learn how to use Zoom. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see my screen, and I'm going to play the video. So if you can't hear the sound, let me know and I will end it.
Hey NYC voters, there's a new way to vote for your city officials in 2021. The City of New York will use the ranked choice voting method for all NYC primaries and special elections for mayor, public advocate, comptroller, borough president, and city council. Ranked choice voting gives New York voters more choice than ever before. Rather than choosing just one candidate, now you have the option to rank up to 5 of your favorite candidates. Here's how it works. Mark your ballot by order of preference, ranking as many or as few candidates as you like. In the first column, fill in the oval next to your first choice candidate, your second choice in the second column, followed by your third, fourth, and fifth choice. At the close of Election Day, all first choice votes are counted. The candidate to receive over 50% of votes wins. If no candidate receives over 50% of the first choice votes, the race moves to round 2. The person with the least number of votes is eliminated. If your first choice candidate does not win and they're eliminated, we then count your second choice vote and add it to the candidate's total. This process continues until we have a winner. Go to vote.nyc to learn more about NYC ranked choice voting and upcoming elections.
So I'm just going to stop sharing that for a second. So that is a really great 1.5-minute primer on what ranked choice voting is and how it works. I think the Board of Elections did a really fantastic job on that. It's a great resource that you can, and I'll post links into the chat later on, but it's a great resource that you can share with friends and family and members of your community as well. Just to get, hopefully the Board of Elections will be doing that in other languages. Right now, the video is only in English, but they do have translations or transcripts of the video in Spanish, Chinese, Korean, and Bengali. So, but hopefully the video itself in the coming weeks will actually be in those other languages as well. So I have a relatively short presentation to go through just to give you all the highlights of basically what was covered in that video, plus a few additional details. I don't need to share sound there. So thank you again, Anthony, for having us. I'm a member, as is Gilda, of Brooklyn Voters Alliance. And we are an all-volunteer, nonpartisan community organization working to protect the voting rights of people in New York State. We have had, we still have, but we're getting much, much better thanks to efforts like like our legislatures like Assemblywoman Walker of really updating our very, very antiquated and suppressive voter laws. So some of the things that we do at Brooklyn Voters Alliance is lobby and work with our legislators to update these laws. So we've seen some amazing improvements over the last few years, including early voting and automatic voter registration, which I know the Assemblywoman will talk about in a little bit. And then we also do a lot with civic engagement and voter outreach and voter education. And 2021 is so important for voter education for New York City this year, because we are using a new way of voting for our elected officials in New York City. So ranked choice voting allows us, the voters, to rank the candidates for a particular office in order of preference. In 2019, the City Council Charter Commission evaluated a whole bunch of different proposals on a whole bunch of different topics. And one of the ones that they moved forward to the voters was ranked choice voting. And it was overwhelmingly approved by almost 3/4 of the voters in 2019, which brings it to the city. So in New York City, often for our primary races and special elections, there are, most of the races will often have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 candidates. Right now, I know on the Democratic ticket for mayor, there are over 20 candidates running. And in the system of voting that we're all familiar with, where you make your single choice of who your preferred candidate is, it's very common and very often happens is whoever ends up winning the most votes, the plurality of votes, is well under 50% of the total voters. So ranked choice voting works to build a consensus among the voters, very much putting the power in the voters' hands to come to a consensus on who the candidate will ultimately be, who represents you for that particular office. So ranked choice voting is employed if a candidate in a particular race does not win 50% plus 1 vote of first choice votes. In that case, as the video described, the last place candidate is eliminated, and the second choice of the voters who pick that candidate as their first choice, their second choices are then redistributed to whoever they chose. And I'll show you some more visuals on this as well. So it allows you to rank the candidates in your order of preference, and it allows your vote to carry forward towards creating that consensus of who will represent you in either city council or across the city or borough president. It gives the voter the chance to say, continued chance to say on who the winner is. And it's really very much a voter-centric, a pro-voter way of voting, rather than having candidates or politicians or a party picking who their voter is. The voters are really picking who they want to represent them. It will also, hopefully, this is New York and Brooklyn, so you never know, but hopefully create more civility in campaigning. You don't, you know, if my preferred candidate is you know, attacking somebody, being very nasty, you know, that's going to have an impact on the way I think about that candidate, and maybe they don't become my top candidate anymore. Likewise, if another candidate, I'm not sure how to rank them, how I want to rank them, they may not be my first choice, but maybe they would be my second or third choice. But if they are being negative to other candidates in the race, maybe, you know, maybe they bump down to the bottom of my list. Additionally, candidates with ranked choice voting, candidates really need to reach out to their entire constituency. You know, sometimes candidates, you know, feel like they've locked up a particular community within their district, and another candidate may have another part of the district kind of locked up. But because candidates, if they're not someone's first choice, they want to be their second or third choice with ranked choice voting. They want to reach out to everybody within their community, within their district, because if they are elected, they obviously are representing everybody. The example I like to give on this is in 2013 in the mayoral race. one of the candidates in the Democratic primary at the time was John Liu, who's now a state senator in Queens. But because he's Chinese American, the other candidates assumed that he would have the votes of the Chinese American community in New York City. And so the other candidates just didn't really spend much time campaigning or spending their resources appealing to the voters in the Chinese American community. But with ranked choice voting, they would want to do that because they may not be, they may or may not be that that candidate's first choice. Obviously, no group is a monolith, but they would want to be the second or even the third choice for people. So it makes it worth reaching out to everybody that you would be representing and not just the people who you think you would get the first choice vote from. So again, we're going to be using ranked choice voting only for city offices that represent New York City. So mayor, comptroller, public advocate, borough president, and city council. And we will be using this in primary elections, which are held in June, and special elections only. We've got a few special elections happening in the city over the course of this month and next month. And so ranked choice voting is being used there now as well. So we will not be using ranked choice voting for things like governor and lieutenant governor, our state representatives, district attorney or attorney general, none of the judgeships, and none of our federal representatives either. So it's just, again, it's just for the offices in the city. So how does ranked choice vote work? You can rank up to 5 of your preferred candidates. So if a race just has 2 candidates, obviously you have choice 1 and choice 2. If a race has 3 candidates, you can rank up to your top 3. With 4 candidates, again, up to your top 4. And if a particular race has 5, 6, 7, 8, however many candidates, you can choose up to 5, your top 5. You have to give your vote to up to 5 different candidates. You cannot give your vote you cannot give all 5 of your choices to the same candidate. In this situation, your ballot would still be counted. The scanner would read your first choice vote, but after that, your ballot is what is called exhausted. So if that candidate were to be eliminated, your vote would then not go to another choice because you only picked one candidate for all of the rankings. Similarly, you cannot give a candidate, more than one candidate, the same rank. So in this example, this graphic here, candidate B and C were given the first choice rank. In this case, your ballot would be rejected altogether. The good news is that if you're voting in person during early voting or on election day, the scanner should reject the ballot and you will have the opportunity to get a new ballot and rank revote and make sure that all of your rankings are with different levels. Different candidate, each candidate has a different ranking. So again, candidates, you can rank up to 5. You do not have to rank 5, but each candidate gets a different ranking. If there are 5 or more people to choose from, you can still only choose to vote for one person and give them your first choice ranking if you choose to. You can choose to rank only 2 people if you want to, but you have the opportunity to rank up to 5 people. You can still write in candidates and give them a rank as well. So that is definitely still an option. That is not going away, nor should it. But you would just write in the candidate's name and then give them the rank. Presumably it would be a first choice rank. And then you can rank the other candidates. In this case, 4 of the other candidates would get the ranks of 2, 3, 4, and 5. And one candidate, because that makes 6, does not get a rank, and that is just fine. So we just had a special election in Queens for a city council district, and this is just a quick view of what that ballot looked like. This is, so the people voting in that special election, this is the ballot that they got. And so that shows how ranked choice voting works. You can see the columns on the right side of the ballot with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then the candidates' names are down the side. Interestingly enough, although it's not fully determined yet, after election night, we know the results of the early voting and the election day ballots, and one of the candidates actually has almost 60% of that vote. They still have to wait a few more days before they can start counting absentee ballots, but it's not likely, based on the number of ballots that I'm aware of, absentee ballots that I'm aware of that that have come in to be counted, that the person who did get that 60% of the votes, of the first choice votes, will go below 50%. So in this case, it's probably unlikely that we will go to that second round of counting. So again, this is how ballots are first choice votes are counted. And once all of those ballots are counted, if any candidate gets 50% plus 1 vote or more, that candidate wins. It's all about building, coming to that majority. So in this particular visual, the first choice votes were counted, and candidate B got 54%. So the election for that race would be over, and that candidate will have won. However, as is often the case in many New York City elections where we have 3 or more people on a ballot for a race, it's very common for this special election side that most of the ballots that come in, no one gets above 50%. So in this particular example, candidate B has 39%, candidate A has 27%, candidate C has 22%, and candidate D has 12%. So what would happen is we would kick into round 2 of ranked choice voting. Candidate D would be eliminated because they have the fewest number of first choice votes. And then the voters who pick that candidate as their first choice, whoever they chose as their second choice is applied to candidates A, B, and C. So ranked choice voting continues until we have just 2 candidates left and one of them has achieved 50%. So in this particular case, after candidate D was eliminated and their second choice votes reapplied, candidate C now has the fewest number of votes in this round, so that candidate will be eliminated. The people who chose candidate C as their first choice, their second choice votes will be applied to candidates A and B, and the candidates who chose candidate D, who was eliminated previously, their third choice votes will be applied to A and B. And that whole rounds of ranked choice voting will continue until we have 2 candidates left, and then whoever has the most votes within the remaining 2 candidates is the candidate who wins that race. So by ranking up to 5 choices on your ballot, your vote will still have an impact on the election, even if your first choice candidate doesn't win. And as I said at the beginning, it contributes to building a consensus on who will win the race and who will represent you, either at city council, as mayor, as borough president, or the other city officers. And again, it's very much a benefit for the voters because we, the voters, should be choosing who our elected representatives are. So just a couple of key dates for you to know. Our primary election will be on June 22nd of this year, which will be for us in Brooklyn, our first opportunity to employ ranked choice voting. I know both the Democratic and the Republican mayoral race the Democratic one will definitely have ranked choice voting applied to it for that primary. On the Republican side, right now there are multiple candidates, so that will also have ranked choice voting applied to it. And the majority of our city council districts will have 3 or more candidates as well. So we'll be using that there, as well as borough president and also comptroller. So to vote, if you're not already registered or anyone you know is not registered to vote for the primary, they must register to vote by May 28th. Additionally, we also have a very key deadline coming up a week from tomorrow, February 14th, which is if you are already registered to vote, but you want to change what party you are registered in, or if you are not registered in a party, if you're an independent, affectionately called a blank by our Board of Elections, and you want to vote in the primary, you have to change your registration to indicate what party you want to belong to so that you can vote in that election. And again, that deadline is a week from tomorrow, February 14th. The Board of Elections must have it in their office. They must have received it by February 14th in order for it to go into effect. It can't be postmarked by February 14th. It must be received by February 14th. And the general office of the New York City Board of Elections at 42 Broadway in Manhattan will be open from 10 to 4 or 5 on Sunday the 14th for anyone who needs to drop off their updated voter registration to declare their what party they want to vote in the primary in. This is just some information. I'll throw this in the chat in a little bit, but it's before you go to vote, it's always good to double check your registration status. Inadvertent, hopefully not purposeful, but definitely damaging purges can happen. So even if you've been registered to vote for 5, 10, 15, 30, however long, it's always good to double check your voter registration status, that you haven't been inadvertently dropped from the rolls before every election. And then it's always good to double check your what your early voting and election day poll sites will be. This information isn't necessarily available right now, but closer to the election, you can check that information online. The New York City Campaign Finance Board does a pretty good job every year of creating a voter guide with information on candidates. And then there's other resources out there, especially with ranked choice voting. It's great to, it's a real opportunity to learn about all the candidates so that you can make your rankings with informed information. So I will stop sharing my screen. And answer any questions that anybody has.
And if anybody has any questions, please press the hand button there or raise your physical hand as well too. If you're on Facebook, please drop it in the chat so that way we could see it as well too. Thank you.
And I'm gonna throw some of those links in there.
All right, cool.
Oh, that is not the one I was looking for.
Richie, hold on.
Chris, did you have a question?
Yeah, just super quick question. Wanted to know if let's say you in the ranked choice you only choose 3 candidates, those other 2, do they get vote? They don't get counted at all. So in the
not by you don't have to if there are you can choose to only vote for one person if you wish to and give them your single first first choice ranking. You are not required to make 5 choices, but you can make up to 5. So if it happens that if you were to say only choose 2 candidates and there were 5 in the race, if it's if your first choice candidate was knocked out after that first round, your vote would go to your second choice candidate. But then if that candidate were knocked out after a round, your vote is what's called exhausted. The ranked choice voting would continue, but your vote would not go on to other candidates because you didn't make the choice.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Great.
Any other questions?
I also just want to make it clear. So we are, like I said, we will be using ranked choice voting for our primary elections and our special elections. We will not be using it for general elections in November. And one of the primary reasons for that is because New York does something called fusion voting, where where a candidate may run on multiple party lines. So often on your ballot in a general election, you'll see the Democratic candidate is also running on the Working Family Party line. Republican candidates may also be running on the conservative line. And there was just concern that, and I think it's justified, that it would be really difficult to create a ballot design in a way, because you wouldn't want to vote for, say, if your candidate first on the Democratic line and mark them second on the Working Family Party line. That would invalidate your ballot. So that's why the City Council Charter Commission decided to go just with primary and special elections. The general elections will be you make your single choice.
As always, Julie, I thank you for this education. Matter of fact, I just learned something new just with that last piece right there. So that's good. Like I've always humbled myself. I don't know everything, but I'm always willing to learn new things. And us as voters, we definitely should be willing to do that. Before we go on to Assemblywoman Walker, there was another question by Samuel. How do we hold on? How do you
decide where the votes go from a candidate who is eliminated? That's a great question, Samuel. So you decide where your vote goes if your candidate is eliminated. So if you chose a candidate as a first choice and they are eliminated after that first round because they got the fewest number of votes, your vote, whoever you pick as your second choice candidate, your vote goes to that candidate. So you are deciding where your vote goes. And that is how the vote is distributed if your candidate is eliminated. The voter's choice goes to their next choice. So I hope that's clear.
Yes. All right. So any other questions, please, again, still drop them and we'll try our best to answer them after we have Assemblywoman, Latrice Walker speak. Assemblywoman Latrice Walker has, I'm gonna be a fanboy right now. She has been hitting home runs and has been advocating for the people for a long time, has been on my radar. Y'all already know that there's only two reasons you're on my radar. Either you're for the people or you're against the people. And usually you want to be the one for the people. And she's been on the radar for the people. I've seen her show up to many things, which is why, with her new appointment, which I'm gonna let her explain what that is, and with AVR, which I'm gonna let her go into as well too. I'm very happy for. Many are happy for. I'm not in her assembly district, sadly, but I still support her, only from this other side of Brooklyn. But, without further ado, Assemblywoman Latrice Walker.
Well, thank you, Anthony. I appreciate it. I know that we always see each other out and about at everything and anything. Whenever the people are gathered, I love the fact that, I don't know if my internet, I live in Brownsville, we're in a broadband desert. So hopefully I'll be able to continue this, but I do need your advocacy with respect to making sure that we have broadband equity. Because of course, if I'm having these issues, so are so many of our children who are relegated to Zoom school. So this year, gratefully, Speaker Hasty appointed me to be the election law chair. And it was an amazing appointment for me because, I think back to my first day of even being concerned about elections. And I think I was about 12 years old. And I was standing outside telling people to vote Democratic during the year that our very own Mayor David Dinkins was running for office. And so the importance of voting is something that has been instilled in me for a very long time. I also have two really, really great mentors, of course, Dr. John Flateau and Esmeralda Simmons, who is a voting rights attorney and who have been pushing the needle with respect to people of color in terms of having access to the ballot. We've seen so many different situations take place with respect to our elections. And I think the thing that struck home the most for me was the fact that we saw one of the most egregious attacks on our democracy recently with the insurrection at the Capitol. And all of that was about voting, right? And I mean, the acts were criminal, the threats were real. And so we recognized how important the franchise is. Whatever the circumstances are, whether it's about power, whether it's about the budget, whether it's about people trying to hold on to whatever semblances of power they believe that they have, the power of the people, again, will always defeat any attack on our democracy. And so that's sort of what is always on the forefront of my mind as we are going through this year. Of course, doing automatic voter registration was a very, very important piece of legislation for me, particularly as we were going through this process. It's always good to recognize that, you know, I may be a Democrat, but the Democratic Party is not a monolithic body. And New York State is a very broad and expansive state. And sometimes things that make sense to us here in New York City doesn't necessarily make the same amount of sense when we talk about many of the upstate districts. And quite frankly, some of the things that make sense upstate may not necessarily be something that we may think of, maybe on the forefront of our imagination, but yet and still, we have to make sure that we are advancing progressive legislation. And so one of the sort of early fights that I had with respect to automatic voter registration, AVR, was that they were only talking about doing the DMV and the Department of Health. And now that makes sense, right? So we know this was before the pandemic hit us. And so not as many people were going into Department of Health sort of offices. And then the DMV thing, though, that was the thing that struck me the most, because not everybody, as we discussed the last time on the call, had access to a driver's license. Like my brother, I always talk about, was born in South Carolina to a midwife. And so he didn't have a driver's license because he didn't have a birth certificate. And, you know, I remember us having to find like school records and birth records. And my mom was like looking through the Bible to kind of get a sense as to when he sort of came into play. And we can't, you know, put people through those types of gymnastics in order to be able to gain access to something that really should be easy. It should be automatic. It should just be. And so to me, having it restricted to the DMV was akin to having a voter ID law, as far as I was concerned. And so I wanted to make sure that people all across the spectrum were going to be able to be included, which is why I fought for the New York City Housing Authority to be included with the 400,000 residents that live there, as well as many of our social services agencies and organizations. And just recently, we did an amendment to include, of course, SUNY. I went to SUNY Purchase, and so, you know, I always love to big up SUNY when I get a chance to. In addition to that, we recently did a couple of constitutional amendments. In 2019, we did a constitutional amendment with respect to absentee voting and making sure that we have no excuse absentee voting. So I know many people, if they weren't in the borough, they had to go down to the Board of Elections, or if they applied by mail, say that they weren't going to be in the county. And that was the way, or they were going to be incapacitated in some way. That was the only way that you could get an absentee ballot. And so we've removed that barrier. Of course, the governor by executive order did so, but we wanted to make sure that we made this not just an event that takes place during a pandemic, but it's just a part of our reality. And so we passed that for this, we will be, and I know in the Senate they did, pass that ballot measure again. And so this year on our ballots, you can look out for 2, maybe 3 ballot measures. So always remember in November to flip over your ballot. We also just did a redistricting ballot measure as well. with respect to having an appointment of a 10-member redistricting commission, which will be a bipartisan and including a nonpartisan board, which will draw the maps for congressional seats as well as state seats and deliver those proposed maps to the legislature to be voted up or down. And you, just like you did with ranked choice voting, the people of the state of New York will have a say in that matter. We've also quite recently, with respect to knowing that many people have concerns about being outside and the interpersonal interaction with respect to petition gathering, we've changed the number of signatures that were required in order to make the ballot. This week or next week, we will also be taking that up for other types of petitions, the opportunity to ballot petition, and the independent nominating ballot petitions as well. And so we look forward again to a very, very aggressive and progressive election year. But another one of the big things that came up as we've seen in the election is the fact that a lot of ballots were thrown out, right? And these are ballots that people, requested, they were mailed to their home, they sat down, they participated in democracy. And when those ballots were mailed in, a lot of things just sort of went afoul of those, the intentions of the people who sent in their ballots. For instance, if you didn't sign the ballot, or if you didn't sign it in the proper place, or if you didn't sign it using the signature that you did when you registered to vote. And a lot of these things, as Julie mentioned, are archaic within our voting laws. And so we are considering as well opportunities for us to be able to cure the ballot in the event that there are stray markings, or if someone did not receive their ballot, that ballot will be returned to them. And then they will be able to send it back in a timely fashion. And in that sense, we're also expanding the length of time by which a person will be able to request their absentee ballot application as well. And so, I know there's like the whole gambit of things that we will be doing. And so again, I don't want to take the whole time up just sort of talking about things that many of you may already know. So I don't know if there are any questions that are in the chat, and I can continue in my presentation as we go through some of those questions. Now I'll touch for a second on ranked choice voting, since this is all about ranked choice voting, right? And one of the things that we are seeing is that our state is in a bit of a conundrum with respect to the voting machine and the software that's going to be used with respect to the tabulation of those ballots that we just saw this great presentation about. And basically, the conversation at the state level is whether or not the state is going to act in order to approve New York City, the New York City Board of Elections, to be able to utilize the ballot tabulating software that's before them. And some of the commissioners are saying that because ranked choice voting is not a statewide initiative, that there's nothing that forces the State Board of Elections commissioners to act. Then there are other commissioners who are very excited about ranked choice voting and have been pushing the needle on that. And so one of the things that we saw that came up was folk were going to be looking at the Queen's election, particularly the one that just passed us, to be able to see whether or not the voting machine tabulation software was going to be reliable enough to approve. And of course, just like anything else, this particular software has to go through a series of tests to see if it actually works the way the manufacturer of it says that it will work. But fortunately or unfortunately, in this sense, it looks like the person who is in the lead in that Queen's election is leading by such a number that ranked choice voting may not necessarily come into play. And so, so then the question becomes, what happens to the test that will be required to be done? So now this leaves the New York City Board of Elections to sort of make a couple of decisions, right? And so either they're going to have to hand count all of those ballots if the software is not approved. And I don't even want to begin to sort of figure out what that's going to look like. I know someone told me that there are 31 declared candidates in the CFB for mayor, and who, the mathematicians out there, I give it up to you. I'm looking for a tutor for my 9-year-old in terms of trying to figure out how to add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators. So hats off to you, because you have a huge job ahead of you now. And so either we'll have to do a hand count, which I doubt that we're going to go down that road, or the Board of Elections is just going to have to say, you know what, we're going to utilize this software anyway. And then that, who knows what will run afoul there. So right now it's going to be required for a lot of attention to be paid with respect to the commissioners and them acting with respect to approving the software that's before them. There was just some guidance that came out, so it looks like it's going in a positive direction, but again, we'll see. We're also paying very close attention to the educational component of this. Now, quite frankly, you have been hosting these ranked choice voting webinars. There's been a number of CFB, different organizations, Rank the Vote. Everyone has been providing opportunities in order for people to gain a lot of information. But yet and still, there are a lot of questions out there. And quite frankly, there's still a lot of things about it I don't understand either. And so we're asking the pointed questions. We're making sure that all of this information reaches the mom and pop who are in their home, who may never look at any of these webinars, but yet and still are our faithful voters for the state of New York and will go out and vote every year, no matter what the circumstances are. And so we want to make sure that they have the proper material and education in order for them to make the right choices. We also know that in the city council, my councilwoman, Alika Embry-Samuel, just passed another measure, a resolution in the city council, in order to make sure that educational opportunities are available to so many members of the city of New York. And so again, we have a lot of work to do. There's a lot that's before us. We want to make sure that whatever happens in the assembly and election law, that you're going to see a lot from our new members with respect to announcements that they will be making about legislation that they're going to be passing. The speaker is listening to everyone's voices and really lifting that voice up and empowering people to be powered up for their districts. And so again, I'm just honored to be a part of it, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for, doing what you're doing and what you have done. And we look forward to more of what you will be doing. That was a lot of doings, but
because we're doing it and doing it well. Look.
Exactly.
Well, I have a great partner too in the New York State Senate, of course, with Senator Zelnor Myrie, who is the election law chair there. Together, he and I have a Voting Rights Act legislation that we're hoping will make it across the finish line as well. We know that in 1965, the Voting Rights Act was something that was important for people all across the country. It was a piece of legislation that people gave their lives for. They made the ultimate sacrifice. And that pretty much tells us that districts have to be majority minority districts if they are declared a voting rights district. New York City have voting rights districts in many of the boroughs, but we also saw that in the Shelby County case, that the teeth was taken out of drawing voting rights districts. And so in this particular piece of legislation, what we did is, instead of the districts that will be drawn having to go through the Department of Justice, U.S. Department of Justice pre-clearance civil rights unit, that we will have a unit that's set aside in the New York State Attorney General's Office Civil Rights Unit in order to go through and make sure that communities of color are able to elect people who share their values, share their interests, and be able to, vote for the candidate of their choice as well, amongst a number of other things this particular bill does. And so that's also going to be another one of the priorities that we have. And again, we just want to make sure that elections are fair, they're efficient, they are accessible, and quite frankly, that they're just easy.
Yes. I definitely appreciate that, Julie. I thank you. You know, Assemblywoman Walker, I thank you. I'm actually about to put up a poll. It's a simple poll, you know, in regards to ranked choice voting. You know, do you have an understanding of ranked choice voting? Yes, no, or you think you need another training is needed. You already know I'm here for the advocacy no matter what. Um, you know, I might have to, you know, keep Julie busy every weekend with some of these trainings and stuff. But like, you know, but like Assemblywoman Walker said, there are a lot of people, you know, who cannot, who don't have access, you know, when it comes to, you know, smartphones or even laptops or iPads, you know, so we have to find a way, you know, despite the literature that will be handed out, hopefully by many, you know, another way, you know, whether we could partner with newspapers and different publications, radio stations and stuff, and just keep banging out this message, banging out the training, doing a massive amount of info sessions. And I'm really up to, even if I have to go out there with a big jumbo screen and tell everybody to social distance and show these videos, then so be it. You know, because we need to make sure that no voter is ever disenfranchised ever again, especially many of these voters who, you know, and I really started getting more understanding about inactive voters, you know, and I'm like, I want to make sure that everybody is active. I want to make sure that, and then good thing with AVR, you know, with automatic voter registration, you know, more people will be able to be registered to vote, which is good, you know, but we have to make sure that we stay on top of them too, to make sure they understand when these elections are. You know, you'll be surprised how many campaigns I've done helped on, and I'm standing there with the poster and literature, and people are like, there's an election today? And I'm like, oh man, like we dropped the ball. You know, so like, I always tell people this, and this is the advocacy side of me too, you know, where, you know, if we could get mailers every 2 to 4 years from multiple candidates, if we could get newsletters, you know, from various organizations, then I feel that they should include a lot of this information as well too, so that way civic engagement could take a whole new level, you know, so that way we can see a massive amount of voters, you know, coming out to the polls. So where like even like districts like the council district I live in, which is like 13.2% voters, like every primary, to where we could go beyond that, you know, to where we no longer have low voter turnout, you know. But then also for our seniors, you know, if they're unable to get to the polls, you know, yes, you know, we have mail-in ballots, but even to a point where we even get able to get to an electronic portion of voting, you know, which I know has to be worked out. The kinks have to be worked out. Legalities have to be looked at, and so many other things. But, you know, there's so much that I have so much hope for. Let me see. Hold up. Okay, let's stop sharing the.
I went ahead and stopped sharing it because I realized that nobody could see the results.
Yeah. I was like, oh. All right. So yeah, so we're looking at, okay, 86% says yes, they have understanding. 14% says that they think another training is needed. That's cool. I'm for it. I'm actually going to see, matter of fact, Julie, I will be contacting y'all to see how I can help out with getting a lot of, you know, getting literature and stuff out as well too. You know, willing to do that. I have other organizations that are willing to help out with that as well too. Assemblywoman Walker, let us know what you need to get the word out as well too about many of these things that you're working on. We'll definitely get it out there. You know, many who know me know that I am always on social media and in these streets, you know, so I like to make sure that people are engaged. You know, we need to make sure we do that. You know, I know there was a question, matter of
Can I
fact, to
also
talk about
just, I want to
yeah,
interject there for one moment. Like one of the things is budget time now, right? And so I want to make sure that I, you know, reach out for some support during the budget process. And so we know that we are putting some very significant responsibilities on the Board of Elections across the state of New York. to live out the tenets of early voting, absentee balloting. And so we know that it requires resources in order to accomplish a lot of these ideals, all of them, in fact. And so during this budget process, we need to hear from you with respect to the support that many of our Board of Elections across the state need in order to make sure these ideals come to fruition. Where we don't have to come back and turn around pointing our fingers at them. But quite frankly, we know that we will still probably be pointing our fingers, but at least making sure that they have the resources that are necessary from the state as well as from the federal government. I was advised that there have been at least 63 attacks on the cybersecurity of our voting processes. And so there were some resources that came from the federal government in order to help us out with that, with HAVA. And we should be, supporting our senator. We know that Senator Chuck Schumer is the Senate Majority Leader now, but he should be hearing from us to be able to say that we are grateful for the resources that you were able to pull together for us, as well as our congressional members. We're grateful for those resources, but we need a whole lot more in order to make sure that we are bolstering the efficacy of voting and make sure that we are free and clear from outside interference in our voting process.
I fully agree. Julie, any last statements?
I just thank you, Assemblywoman Walker, for everything you've done. We're so excited that you're the election chair. Brooklyn is very well represented in that regard, in both the Senate and the Assembly, so that's wonderful. And just as the Assemblywoman said, there are many of our neighbors and friends who just don't know anything about ranked choice voting, and as wonderful as these forums are to educate everybody, not everybody has the access to it. But one of the benefits of these forums is as you learn about it, you're able to talk to your communities, your neighbors and your family about it as well. It's upon all of us to educate each other about how the system works and why it's so important. So I hope you're able to take this information and carry it out with you and talk to people in your community about it as well.
So I wanted to also just piggyback. I saw in the notes, Julie, that the State Board of Elections gave the okay to the New York City Board of Ed to use the software. They did, right? And so the okay was given. There was a letter with respect to guidance was received to our Executive Director of New York City Board, Mike Ryan. That was about the usage of the software for those Queen's special elections in order to, help make sure that transition is smooth. And this wasn't a school president, class president election, like what I used to do back in IS 55. But this is the real deal, this is the real thing. And so it was approved for that. However, there still has not, from all information that I've received, there has not been an official vote of the commissioners with respect to the software. And so we still need a lot of advocacy with respect to that.
Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yes, and I was at an action earlier today, and I put out a challenge to folks in regards to that action. I want to put out a challenge to everybody who's on the Zoom right now, everybody who's on the Facebook right now, everybody who clicked on the link on Twitter and Instagram to come and watch this until I'm able to actually, find some way to put all of the one live into all of these channels and stuff. But I challenge you all to share all of these videos. It doesn't have to just be this panel right here. It can be any RCV panel out there, that's guiding the people, that's educating the people, but then, hold your Zoom calls as well too. Talk to your mothers and your fathers and the elders about this, and as Julie said, educate others. If you haven't attended an association meeting, play this as well. Share the screen and play one of these videos, because truly we are at a time where we need to make sure that we do not drop the ball, when it comes to elections. We cannot go back to what we just went to, for the past 4 years, even though ranked choice voting had nothing to do with that. But we want to make sure that we get everybody engaged fully, but then also we have to look at and make sure that what happened 4 years ago, for the past 4 years, doesn't happen on a state level, doesn't happen on a city level as well too, so, please, folks, I'm reaching out to y'all to please share this out. If you're a union member, share this out to your fellow union members. If you're a union leader, share it out to all your rank and file members. They need this information too. They are voters. They are constituents. They are folks who want to be engaged, who want this information as well too. And this is one of the ways to actually get it to them. The platforms are here. Please use the platform as much as possible. We're talking about that. I'm gonna upload these onto YouTube as well too. We're gonna share out some of these videos out to so many other organizations. Yes, and Brooklyn Voters Alliance is definitely willing to team up with various organizations and advocates. Hold up, the thing just popped up. All right. Please email them at bkvotersalliance@gmail.com. Again, that is bkvotersalliance@gmail.com. I like to emphasize on BK because I do have a bias with my borough. Like, I love my borough. Brooklyn is where it's at right now. But definitely, please share it out to all your organizations, to all your community groups, to your church groups, to even contact Brooklyn Voters Alliance, because I'm guaranteed they won't just educate folks in Brooklyn. They're about educating people everywhere. So if you're in the Bronx, if you're in Harlem, if you're in Queens, if you're in Staten Island, please contact them so that way that you can set this up for your organizations, because we need to make sure it gets out there big time. Gilda,
I see another question too from Sam Gilbert asking, would I support canceling the gathering of signatures due to COVID-19 now for this election? Now, again, so one of the things, the short answer that I would give is yes. However, right, there's always a big but. And again, New York State, again, is not a monolithic body, right? And so while it makes sense because of what we went through here in New York City, we don't want to ever have to revisit that episode again. Like, I want 2020 to remain a blur in my rear view mirror. However, there are many other counties across the state which may not have experienced that same threat. And not just necessarily, upstate members. There are still a lot of New York City members who hold true to the process of speaking to voters, of interacting with voters. Some have said, we could stand outside in front of supermarkets, et cetera, et cetera. And so the speaker handles his body as a member-driven body. And that's one of the things that we really appreciate the most about Speaker Hasty. And quite frankly, there has not been a consensus with respect to the straight canceling of petition gathering. And so we're trying our best to get those numbers down as much as possible. Some of the lowest numbers that we've had is maybe about 10 with respect to some of the state committee seats. And so I know that we're not where many people want us to be with respect to petition gathering, but we're pushing the envelope as much as we can in order to get those numbers to be as low as possible. But again, you know how this works. You continue to be strong and continue your advocacy, and hopefully we'll get to that point. But I do just want to mention another thing that we did recently as well, and that is with respect to the process of counting votes, right? Counting absentee ballots. And one of the things that we saw, I know I mentioned the last time too, that in Georgia, we were all watching the election, not really sure what's happening in the presidential primary or in the presidential election. And there was like these numbers that just kept fluctuating in Georgia between, you know, our candidate and their candidate. And at one point in time, there was just this influx of votes. Whoosh, and all of those votes went to the Democratic winner candidate in that particular race. And everyone was like, well, where did that come from? And that's because in New York, we had a process with absentee ballot counting where there was a time period after the election took place when the votes were allowed to be opened, checked for inconsistencies, invalidated or not invalidated. And so now one of the things that we are doing is to be able to open those ballots ahead of time, be able to prepare them, do the ballot curing that we talked about earlier. And then on election night, to be able to pass all of those absentee ballots through the machine so that the counting can take place at an earlier time, as opposed to having to wait 2-3 weeks, and I will even dare to say months, as we see there's a congressional election upstate, which I don't believe has been declared at this point in time, because I was just seeing some media reports about that race still sort of going back and forth. So again, we are still trying to make sure that this process goes as smoothly as possible, but I look forward to continuing the work and looking to hear from the advocacy of Mr. Gilbert.
Definitely. So appreciate everybody for tuning in. If you were just catching this now, you can catch it on the replay. But definitely you're gonna see this in almost all your Facebook groups. I guarantee it. But definitely, I'd like to again thank Julie Kerr from the Brooklyn Voters Alliance. I'd like to thank Assemblywoman Latrice Walker from 8055. And I'd like to thank you all for tuning in, whether it's on Facebook, Twitter, or on Zoom. We will be having more civic engagement sessions in regards to ranked choice voting, automatic voting rights, and automatic voter registration, but then a whole lot of other issues that we have as well to great information knowledge power. Yes, thank you, Michelle. So we're definitely gonna do a lot in the next couple of weeks. You're going to see a lot of things posted up from myself, other advocates, other organizations. But again, if you would like to hold a session like this as well, to a training for your organization, for your community, for your tenant association, for your church group, or so forth, contact Brooklyn Voters Alliance at bkvotersalliance@gmail.com. All right. I wish you all well. I wish you all a safe weekend. Make sure to wash your hands, wear your masks, stay safe, and just go out there and be civically engaged and help us educate the people as much as possible. All right. Love y'all.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Nice seeing you, Latrice. Let's go, Anthony.
Yes.
All right, have a good night.
All right, I'm gonna contact you, matter of fact, tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm gonna send my invite for my meeting on the 17th at 7 p.m. I'll send it to you to the Alliance, right? At Gmail.
Yes.
Voters Alliance. Okay. All right. See you later. Good night.
All right.